Bryson, welcome to Tactical Edge. I've been looking forward to hosting you one of these days, and we finally have the opportunity to have you on board. So thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. I've wanted to be a part of these ever since Jorge and Liz have been bragging about them for years.
Yeah, and Bryson is definitely going to join us, Andres, in Santa Marta. God willing, he'll be here with us, leading one of the CISO table. So it's gonna be heavy hitters in Tactical Edge CISO Latin Summit in October. Bryson, what's the before we start with you? There's always some silly things going in our industry, right? And I think it started yesterday or during the week. And so, what team are you in? This is for the Log4j. Right. So, what team are you in? Like,
Well,
like,
I mean,
like
I feel like
Forge?
you just okay. There we go. So you got to present both. It's like,
That
well, here's the right answer,
you,
Bryson. But pick.
you pick. So I cannot believe that there's actually conversations going. How do you pronounce? Is it La Forge or Log4j? I'm in team Log4j. I don't know what team you're in, Bryson.
Yeah. So I think part of it is that cybersecurity is a high stress profession. Right? We're never in control.
Yeah.
These things come, they surprise us, and we all run around like the sky is falling because the sky is falling. We suddenly have assets that are vulnerable that we have no idea, and it's a surprise every time. And we spend all this effort on the configuration management of just saying, these are the assets I have. And then that next level of, well, is it vulnerable to this latest thing? Well, we have to understand that and this and that. And so I think kind of a little bit of this is blowing off steam.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
sort of a little parody of picking at these things.
Okay.
Personally, I'm with you. I pronounce it like it just literally is spelled
Yeah.
log
Yeah.
for
Forge.
J.
Yeah.
If they wanted to be Forge, they should have just made a G there.
Yeah. So
And
it's
as I'm sure you're aware, there's already been a second vulnerability in log4j found. So we are still going.
Jesus. That's and that goes to many of the conversations that Liz has been talking about supply chain and things like that. This is all part of the supply chain. But anyway, that's a different conversation. So Bryson, what's your conversation today, your presentation today about?
Sure. So it's called How to Throw the Elephant, and it is putting the context of where does cybersecurity fit within a business? Because I think a lot of folks don't really kind of get that, and that leads to a lot of frustration and challenge. Once you understand that, understanding the business, how to then get the business to your side. And then there are a lot of pieces for that. And then we'll close out with pulling it all together with some multiple collaborative processes and techniques that we can use to improve not only the cybersecurity, but the awareness and engagement with the rest of the business.
Great. And that's definitely something that we've been talking about throughout the whole year in our weekly conversations of conversing with CISOs. Basically, that is, as a CISO, you need to understand that you're part of the business. The business is not here for cybersecurity, unless cybersecurity is one of your solutions. But most probably, it's not your product. So that's very cool. All right, Ben. Stage is yours. How are we going to do this presentation or conversations? How are we going to do this? Oh, there you go. There's the
There you
unicorn
go.
coming out.
Right. So, I mean, we're talking about cybersecurity. You need mythical creatures because we've never solved these problems. So, how else to get there than other than we have to create something that doesn't exist?
Absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. So are you going to share screen or how are we going to
Yeah.
do this? Okay,
I'm going into presentation,
beautiful.
sharing the screen, minimizing the unicorn.
Minimizing the unicorn.
There you go.
Throwing the elephant. Beautiful. All right, buddy. Stage is yours.
All right. Hold on a second. Let's get this right. Okay. So, throwing the elephant. This is me. I'm the founder of Scythe, which is my current job. We are an adversary emulation platform, so we allow you to recreate threats to use them. I'm the co-founder of the ICS Village with Tom Van Norman. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We build critical infrastructure exhibits and collaborate for training and education in industrial control systems. We might actually be in South America next year. There's a potential trip we're looking at. And then I founded a consultancy called GRIM, so penetration testing, red teaming, vulnerability research. And as you can see, I use the unicorn for all sorts of different educational purposes. So where you work in an office building. Well, at least you used to, because now with the pandemic, a lot of us work from home. One of the challenges with the shift to remote work is, of course, that we now have mixed assets. We have employees that have computers that they suddenly use in different ways, and it's hard to get the security aspect of that wrapped around. Well, in every business, there is the room. The room is where the decisions are made. This is where strategy and vision come from on high, from the C-suite, from the board, on how the business is going to be conducted. Of course, there's typically an elephant in that room. So the way it works, right? How does the world actually work inside the room? Well, first of all, you have to have PowerPoint. PowerPoint is the tool of leadership. Those colors really do matter for our strategy. And then the way things are actually done. So we take the vision and the strategy from PowerPoint, and down in where the world actually works, almost everything comes back to Excel. That's operations. So PowerPoint is vision, Excel is operations. So the elephant in the room. If we were together, I would ask the audience, and so we're going to do a quick mental exercise. What do you think about when you think of an elephant? Just whatever comes to mind. Elephants are gray. They're large. They go wherever they want, right? Start just thinking through some things about this mental image you have of an elephant. How would you describe that elephant to yourself? All right. You got it? You holding on to it? So you just described your boss. The elephant is your boss. Whatever those characteristics, adjectives, nouns, whatever they were, that's your boss and how you see your boss. Your boss is an elephant. However, this is how the elephant sees themselves. All right, so the hierarchy of the herd. So we have your boss is an elephant. You don't just tell an elephant what to do. This, of course, is the theme for this talk, is how do we get elephants, which represent different parts of business, anything from our boss to other bosses to other structures and organization. How do we get them to where we want? This has historically been a challenge in cybersecurity because the business, for the most part, treats us at a lower level, and there are some reasons for that. The first is the hierarchy of the herd. So your boss is actually a pretty cool person, right? So here she is. But the problem is that security is at the bottom, supporting information technology that supports business operations, that is implementing leadership. Now, some things we can take away from this. This structure is the same everywhere. Budgets work this way. The largest budget in any organization goes to business operations. That's why we are in business. Information technology is a requirement to scale a modern business. And so a fraction of a business operation budget will be for information technology. And then security is the assurance of information technology to execute business operations. And so it is a fraction of IT. So you can just do the math there. Business budget, IT budget, security budget, all the time. The only thing that changes is a little bit of a percent, right? Maybe our IT budget is 5% and it's 7% there. Security budget is 3% and 4% there, right? It doesn't change the relationship and the fractional consideration. This is the hierarchy that we're fitting in. All right, so pop quiz. What percent of boards have a dedicated committee for cybersecurity? While you're thinking about that, I will note, because I believe my slides will be shared afterward, I provide links to all sources of everything that I use in my presentations. One, I always believe in giving credit where credit is due. And two, it makes it easy for after the presentation, if there's something that you want to deep dive on, you can deep dive on it. So, of course, this is a setup. Less than 10%. 9% of boards have a dedicated committee for cybersecurity. What is our takeaway of this? Our takeaway is that at the top leadership level, cybersecurity is still not always the priority in what we think it is. All right, but let's put this all in context. So what does the Serengeti look like? Where are our elephants? Well, so in this case, I used the United States. How many businesses are there in the United States? 32.5 million. All right, so there are a lot of businesses. And the key here is, well, how many of those businesses have security? Now, this is self-reported. People have different definitions for security. But roughly about 30 to 40% actually have security. And then the final piece here is how many have their own red team? Now, the reason I ask this question is, again, this is this hierarchy. Red teams are quality assurance. Security is measured by the threat. Red teams emulate the threat. Hence, they are quality assurance that our security around our information technology is at the level that we want it to be at, or some way to measure it. And so when we start looking at that investment tied to those relationships, that's the key here. And yeah, not a lot have their own organic red teams. And the point of this is not to pick on this or to say everybody needs a red team. It's just setting the lay of the land, and this is what we are operating in. Okay, so the rules of the Serengeti. You probably have heard the aphorism that there are two kinds of companies, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. Well, I have a different aphorism or maxim that I like to bring, and that there are two kinds of village chiefs. There are two kinds of leaders. There are leaders that care about security. There are leaders that don't care about security. The ones that care about security, you've got a good start now. Now it's about understanding and working with them. The ones that don't care about security, you've got a different challenge in terms of education. So again, putting everything back into context, there's a concept of Maslow's hierarchy, where we as animals, humans, we need water, food, shelter, and then security. And so the starting point for security is compliance. Without compliance, a business cannot exist. And the reason I highlight this is a lot of folks tend to look down on compliance as that's not security. And while there's truth to that, it's still a foundational requirement for the business. And so we have to understand that that administrative burden is necessary. It is existential. The business cannot exist if it is not compliant. From there, we are able to layer on security elements. Because at the end of the day, from a business perspective, security is a cost center. We are not generating direct revenue. We are a cost center that is there to assure, again, business operations, which are revenue generating. So, how do we convince the elephant? Almost everybody is familiar with the managing down. Elephants talk down. I get that, right? There's a boss. I do what a boss tells me. Everybody has learned that one. But there's two other dimensions to managing. There is you managing up. How do I manage the elephant? There's also you managing sideways. You're not the only person that reports to that elephant. How can your peers be a part of managing the elephant? A security champion program. How about folks from other organizations? What is their ability to help you manage up? And so two additional dimensions we're going to bring into this is we're going to talk about how do we manage up? So how do we directly work with that elephant? And how do we get others to support us, both directly that work with us and across the organization to also accomplish our goals? All right, so working directly with the elephant, managing up. It is their starting point in their language. They have bosses too. What does their boss look for? And what is their win? We're taking the key part of this away is it's all about them. We are talking and understanding them, and we're doing it in a way that they understand, and we're looking for what's in it for them. So how do we find the answers to these questions? We ask. Sounds simple, but you'd be surprised, right? Your boss has issues. Your boss has things on their mind. Ask them. Talk to them. Establish that relationship. Okay. So your boss, of course, works in a village. Starting point is, what does your village do? So what does the business do? How well do you know the business? I first learned this one a number of years ago, very long time ago. I worked at a manufacturer, and I started off on the manufacturing side, and I worked with the supply chain, and I learned exactly what we built and what we did, and I learned the plant managers, and I walked the floor, and I got to see what we actually built. And I changed jobs, and I went over into the IT organization. And I was shocked that nobody in IT knew exactly what the company did. Generally, like, I know we build stuff. I don't know what we build or why we build it or who we build it with or those folks across the floor. And those were our customers. IT was there to serve them, and they didn't know what they did. If you think about that, right? How can you support somebody if you don't know what they do and what their intrinsic needs are, what their considerations are? So walk the floor, go talk to business operations, go learn what the business does at a real level, not just at a high level. Some other things that we can do to round that out is any public business is going to have different kinds of business filings that they have to share that explains what they do. And it's interesting because you can go into those filings and they will list out their risks. So this is the business perspective, what are the risks to our business in being able to execute? And where on that list is cybersecurity? It will be on there, hopefully. Usually it is these days. Most places actually do list it. But we are not the number one risk most of the time. We're typically somewhere between 3, 4, and 5 on that list. But that is the business formally telling everybody how they see the risk to their business and where we, information security, fit in that list. Investor briefings are another example of the latest on what's going on because they are required to publicly disclose that information to investors. Your company might be in the news for lots of different reasons. So that's a way to get intel on what's happening in your business. And then a hat tip to Jake Williams, aka Malware Jake. Most leadership organizations, they have different kinds of structured learning or recommended reading for senior managers. So the MBA reading list of business books for them to read, where they're reading those so that they learn how to speak business and learn their jobs. You can also read those books to learn how to speak business and how to do their jobs. What better way than how to speak to the elephant in their language by reading the book that's teaching that language? So get the right equipment. Okay. This is the Cyber Defense Matrix. It was created by Sunil Yu. He released this at RSA a few years ago. And the intent here is now that we're starting to get into how we need to understand ourselves to be able to convince the elephant. So our enterprise is split across the left with different categories, devices, applications, networks, data, users, across 5 phases of defense. The starting point of defense is identification, configuration management, asset management, knowing what I have and establishing control over it. 80% of information security starts with, what do I have? And then in the case of where we were talking with Edgar at the beginning about Log4j, what might potentially be vulnerable based on what I have. If I don't even know what I have, I can't even start to look at that question. Then is protection. So my ability to ensure that there is not unauthorized access or impact on any particular of those categories. So that's the protection. That is the prevention aspect. Then we get into the phases in a post-breach scenario. My ability to detect what's happening, my ability to respond to that, and then my ability to recover and minimize the impact of that breach. So the 5 phases of defense, starting with what do I have, to keeping you out, to what do I do once you get in, across all the categories in our area. And the recommendation here is whatever vendors, services, people, software, whatever you have, putting them into these categories so you can understand what you already have for being able to conduct these exercises versus what are the gaps that you don't have for where you're at. So an easy exercise that within a little bit of time, you can immediately tell where you're at. Okay, so I'm an Army officer. Everything has to be simple. So you probably have seen lots of different ways to describe the attack chain. I like to simplify it. And the reason that we're talking about the attack chain is, again, security is defined by the threat. Threat is what we need to use to educate. So elephants are scared of fire. What is fire? Fire is only 3 phases for an attack. Reconnaissance, I learn about you. Initial access, I break in. Post access, I conduct all of my operations to accomplish my goals, whether that is ransomware, whether that is stealing, whatever that is. And some takeaways from this. 1, the greatest effect to the business is in the post-access phase. That's where the attacker completes all of their operations to you. Whatever is done, whatever the full impact of the breach is, occurs in the post-access space. Initial access, which ties to protection on the Sunil Yu cyber defense matrix, there is some business value because that's where denial of service ties to internet-facing assets. But fundamentally, it's not the most. The other advantage to post-access is that the phases of detect, respond, and recover, that's where we're able to operate there for minimization, as well as that's where we're able to exert control. That's where we fully have control. There are an infinite number of ways to gain access. There are only a finite number of things that you can do in a post-access environment. So this is the definition of fire. Okay, great, thanks. Now, what is fire? The key takeaway here is this is our ability for a data-driven insight for risk analysis and mitigation. This is not, hey, we have an issue, look, there's fire, we could do all of these things. You have to be rational. It has to be contextual. It has to be tied to the business. And that's key because elephants do not respond well to being whined at or told what to do. The intent of the fire here, again, rational, business context, data-driven insight where we can lead to recommendations. So this is our goal for what we're going to be doing with this fire, not just setting things on fire. Okay, so how do you make fire? This is the part of a lot of these kinds of talks where I think there's a breakdown where a proverbial expert tells you, you should just threat model and you should have all this threat intelligence. And everybody is like, yeah, that sounds great on paper. How do I actually do that? So this is the cheap 101 way to get started. MITRE ATT&CK has a website, and there's the website, and they list all of the known threat groups that have been spotted and categorized. Type in your industry. So in this case, I typed in manufacturing. It's just a simple text search on a web page, and it will match to every threat that has been seen against that industry. From there, I can just click on the hyperlink to that group, and it will show me all of the tradecraft that has been documented tied to that industry. You now have real-world threats that have been shown to go against your kind of industry, so the business perspective, and then the detail of the what and how it does it. all right there. Takes you just a few clicks to do it. So once we've done that, what about working with other zookeepers, right? We're not the only ones that have to throw this elephant. So going back to managing sideways, who else can we bring into this? If I'm just trying to generate fire, like the red team perspective, wouldn't it be better if I could bring other folks into a collaborative approach? So this is the idea of a purple team. So how I define a purple team is it is a collaborative, milestone-driven process for security outcomes. Collaborative, I'm going to have not just myself doing it. I'm going to bring in as many of the defensive functions as a part of the business that I can. And then milestone-driven, in that we're going to agree together what are the specific sub-goals of this overall exercise and the process that we're going to do. So when we build out those tactics that we pulled, for example, from the MITRE page or from other threat intelligence that might be available, we're going to agree that we're going to run those things against these kinds of assets, and this is exactly what we're going to do. And so when we do it in step, and we validate each step together, as opposed to the traditional black box red team where we might define a scope and something we want to do, they go away and then come back with the report. So what this gives us is, of course, insight into how we're doing. That insight is not just technology. We're also going to have a view into the people and the process aspect of this. We're going to generate improvement as we go, because as we're driven to each milestone, we're improving as we go, and we're repeating those to make sure that we achieve the level that we want. And so the overall exercise is the outcome of improvement and, of course, alignment to the business, because the context that we drove that fire for that threat, for those improvements, are tied to the business. So considerations, of course, are the tools that you need to do this, and I'll be making some recommendations. Training, the process itself is something that you want to start small and get better at. Communication is key. Communication is key to build the agreement to do this. Communication is key during the exercise because it is collaborative, and that sharing is important. So the specific process is taking threat intelligence. So I gave you an example of how to go and find threat intelligence tied to you. From that, I want to organize my specific milestones, which are the techniques, tactics, or procedures that I want to do. Like I said, the MITRE page, once you click on a particular threat group, will list those out. There are a lot of other resources. At the end of this presentation, I include a number of resources for more information. Then let's get together and let's tabletop it. Let's just talk through what do we think is going to happen when we try to execute these techniques. So as I'm generating fire, what do we expect to happen? Then we're actually going to do it. So now I go into the real world, and this can be in the lab, this could be in production. Make sure that you get approval for either. And let's run the attack in an iterative fashion of executing attack procedure, detection engineering, exactly what the detect, response, recover aspect would be to that, and continue to iterate through that. So that's the full plan for the Purple Team process. I would say the best price is free. So this is a community project that Jorge Orquias and Adam Ashinchi and I put together several years ago called the C2 Matrix. And this does several things for you. So as you're trying to build up, how do I emulate an attack? What we've done is we've had the community evaluate a number of tools that are attacker tools that you can use. And so when you decide what you want to do on this web page, we created a decision matrix. So as you decide what you want to do, it'll walk you through a questionnaire, and it'll limit down exactly which tools are able to meet what you're talking about. So you'll have your choice of what's available, and it includes free tools. And then on top of that, to make it even easier, because one of the challenges with free tools is around documentation and installation. In collaboration with SANS, we released a Linux distro for free called SANS Slingshot that has a large number of Purple Team tools, and not just the C2 tools, but also some reporting and analytic tools. So that's a free distro that's off of the SANS website to help you do all of this. So here's a way to get started for free with free threat intelligence. So you can do this whole process really just with some time, and it's not hard to actually execute a lot of these things. So one of the challenges that we get a lot, and particularly in the last couple of years, has been the rise of ransomware. And so emulating ransomware is something we want to do. Of course, we don't want to encrypt actual production data. So how do we test ransomware effectively in our environment without actually hurting the environment? Because that's kind of that'll get you fired. Not just setting fire, you'll be fired. So the key is dummy data. And there are two ways to generate dummy data. And this can also tie into looking at exfiltration and data loss prevention. So there are a lot of different ways to, or a lot of different values to using this approach that we can benefit from. So we'll start with fake, where we just want a script that creates, and here I have an example of it, where we create just dummy data of a certain size. And it just fills in the file with randomized characters, and the intent there is that we're just able to generate the activity on the data, and it doesn't matter what's in the data. Obviously, that's not as useful for DLP, but for ransomware, that's just as effective. If we want something that is more realistic, there's a website, makaru.com, and you can go in there and tell it what kinds of fake data you want generated. So I want names, I want phone numbers, I want social security numbers, I want bank accounts, I want credit cards. It'll make all of that information up for you. And now you have realistic looking data that you can work with, of course, without actually affecting real data. So start simple. Several reasons for this. One, we talked about the purple team process being a training factor. Getting good at the process itself is part of the journey. Getting your defenses and security insights better is a part of the journey. So start simple. So here is a simple extract of a very, most basic malware. It's going to gain access by being run through rundll32.exe. It is going to establish an HTTPS command and control. It's going to run who am I from the command line, and it's going to invoke some PowerShell. And I picked these four things for a reason. One, rundll32 is an organic executable in Microsoft operating system. So all Microsoft has that. It is one of the key approaches to an attacker is using things that are already there, because I want to masquerade as something that is not malicious. HTTPS is the most common command and control that I'm going to use. And the reason that I like HTTPS is it's encrypted. So I look like just all of the other HTTP traffic on your network, and I'm encrypted, so you can't inspect easily what I'm doing. Running who am I, a classic initial command, right? So who am I is another executable that is already in your environment. As an attacker, I want to run this because I just want to know where I'm starting. Attackers are not omniscient. My first access into your enterprise is I know where I know the company I'm at. I can see the domain, but I don't know specifically where that system is all the time. And where is that system with respect to where I want to go? And so being able to establish an initial recon of orientation is key. Now, this is a great example of something to detect off of, because how often should or could your regular users run who am I? Not very often. If they can even find the command line, that's impressive. So it's something that is such an innocent command, and it's already there in the environment, but just by the fact of it being used is already a suspicious factor just by itself, because it's not something that the average person can get to. I see a raised hand. I don't know what that means. Andre, did you have a question or something? Oh, okay. And then lastly, PowerShell for similar reasons. So PowerShell is a powerful tool set for IT to use in their environment to be able to control all of those Microsoft systems. It's the same reason that an attacker is going to love it. And so there's been lots of work on how attackers use PowerShell, because again, Why would I try to bring something complicated to the environment when I can use the tools you already provide me that are powerful? And PowerShell is an easy one because, again, PowerShell.exe being invoked in a computer, the only people that should be doing that are IT. And so finding a way to audit for its use in the environment and being able to correlate that to proper IT use is a very basic function that is going to take out an entire swath of techniques that an attacker is going to use. So simple detection engineering, right? In this case, I should have added PowerShell.exe, is using something like Sysmon. Sysmon is a lightweight and free driver by Microsoft. The advantage there is that it's native, so Microsoft to Microsoft works. They just came out with the Linux version, so it's not quite as functional as the Microsoft, but it's there also to be able to maintain those schemas for Linux. And so from a detection engineering perspective, here is a free tool that is from the first party vendor and some simple detections that I can start to create where when I see process creations around that's something that I highlight and track in my detection engineering. So I've been talking about living off the land with PowerShell and Who Am I and Run DLL32. A good friend of mine, Olaf Hartong, has done some analysis, and he maintains this of what are the most common executables and scripts that are being used by attackers. And so when you're looking for ideas of how to run the same campaigns with some variables, because those variables are going to come back to what kinds of things are in your environment that attackers are taking advantage of, this is a good thing to throw into that mix. So how to make more sophisticated fire. Sorry about that. Yeah, PowerPoint. All right, so working with other zookeepers beyond just the Purple Team process. So Purple Team process is, of course, going to be IT security and IT adjacencies, but there are other functional areas out in the business itself. Human resources, finance, different divisions in business operations. Wouldn't it be great if we could get them to help advocate for us? So this is what a security champion program is. Well, security champions are, of course, used to working with different animals. We are used to working with our elephant here. They work with different kinds of animals out there. They already know how to speak to those different animals. So why not try to invite those animals into our herd? So how do we do it? So first of all, engagement. We need to identify them. So classic ways to do this are lunch and learns. Different things where we're expanding the invitation to see who comes, see who's engaged, because you can't make them do this. They have to want to do it. And for a lot of folks, it is an interesting opportunity. If you work in human resources, the opportunity to go hang out with the IT security team every now and then, that could be kind of, that could be kind of cool. The key is expectations. What do you expect from them? Being clear and concise with that up front, and then making it worthwhile. How else can we incentivize them so that they not only want to do this, but they want to stay with this and help us? So how to make trumpeting noises, right? So we've gone through the whole elephant metaphor. We've identified our elephant. We've learned to speak to our elephant. We have used a Purple Team process to use relevant business context and threat intelligence to show fire so that we can show improvement. Now we need to make trumpeting noises. So our adversary emulation plan should consider the crown jewel assets. So that's a term I made up. And the idea is that what are the most important things to the business? Not all assets, not all people, not everything is created equal. What's the most important to the critical parts of the business? And let's start there. 1, business context is obvious. 2, we've started to establish improvements on the parts that matter the most. We can't protect the whole business on day 1, but we can start to make the improvements on the key parts, and then we can work out from there. As we're going through this process, we want to track each engagement, each improvement, each team's wins. Every little piece that's a win, we want to be tracking and showing that improvement over time. That automatically turns into executive reporting. So what benefits us also ties into our ability to speak to the elephant and the elephants to show them how this is improving for them and what it's getting them over time. Make sure that we're putting the results in contextual business terms. Do not talk nerd to the elephants, right? We want to be talking in their languages. So showing the financial risks to a particular threat, aka the fire, versus saying this exact server user ID was affected, right? It sounds simple, but it's in their language and it's something they will understand. So this will lead you to a program that includes people, process, and technology that is aligned to the business, that enables you to move the elephant over time. So what do elephants love more than anything? Metrics. So how do we put this into relevant metrics? So there are really three areas of the metrics. It starts with visibility. What do I even have the ability to see, right? So going back to when I generate fire, what was logged? What did I even see? Well, okay, we saw that. Was there an alert based off of it? So driving the tools to engage the security people in a valuable way is a key metric. Putting it into the business terms, and then finally, as we get there, over time, start being able to measure the time aspect of detection, response, and recover. So in the beginning, we'll start with just trying to build visibility for better alerting to improve detection. And then over time, we want to be able to measure the people in the process with the technology of our ability to just not just see it, but minimize the breach and impact. Going on an expedition together. So some ideas here around other ways that we can pull this. Tabletops. Everybody has heard about tabletops. Tabletops are a great example to drive business context in an easy verbal way. We sit around a table, we walk through a scenario together, and we both learn about the scenario and the potential impacts of the business and what would happen. Lunch and learns, where we highlight some things. The key there is, again, don't speak nerd with the lunch and learn. Make sure that you're speaking in a language that the attendees from the business are going to care about. Another idea, this is something I put together a couple of years ago, is a choose your own adventure. So this is like a tabletop exercise, only we've defined what the choices are in advance. And so as we go through the scenario, the group can vote on what choices are taken. They don't have to be technical because the choices are already presented to them, and they can learn from the adventure itself of what's happening. Another idea I came up with is I call it the Purple Team Plus. So when we talked about a purple team, of course, we talked about it with a very tight IT security and IT group being a part of that. Well, why not invite other parts of the business to join that purple team? Why not invite security champions to be a part of that purple team? I think that would be something that would be pretty neat, actually, is them getting to be a part of those exercises and getting to see the attack and the technical scenario play out in real time and learning from that. So again, it all comes down to money, right? So this is a joke off of a movie called Spaceballs. So the fight against the juggle is the fight for more money. And this goes to where we have to demonstrate our value to the business. We have to constantly be in their context. That's what's going to help cybersecurity be the appropriate priority and investment for what they're doing, and enables us to continue our operations and grow them. The inspiration I came up with for this talk is from a book I read about 15 years ago called Throwing the Elephant, hence the name. And it was specifically on just the business side of the art of how to manage up in a business relationship. And then a number of resources. So we publish with Jorge Orquia's team a constant threat intelligence informed adversary emulation plans. So whenever you're looking for your own plans, we've already built a whole bunch of them. I talked about the C2 matrix. Another reporting and analysis tool that I'll recommend, although it is commercial, but I just think it's fantastic. It's called PlexTrack. We covered MITRE. And then every month, Jorge and I and Justin Els from Trusted Sec have been doing a offensive tactics webcast. So we'll be talking about the offensive tactics, so how to create fire in a more complex manner. We're continuing to analyze and share those techniques for everybody. And that concludes the presentation.
All right. Wow, that was a lot of information. I feel like we have to eat the elephant one small bite at a time.
And that's where I was trying to break it down, right? Like each part of that process, how to start simple, how to build your own confidence in your ability to walk through each of those steps, how to build the education inside and out as you go. Because you can't just take the whole elephant at once, right?
Yeah.
You have to find all of these pieces, and over time, that's your ability to throw the elephant.
Right. One of the things that you said at the beginning was read the books that teaches you the language the elephants speak. And we've been saying that again in our weekly show. You need to understand the language. You need to speak the language. But my question, and the question that we had during those shows, is it's got to be a give and take from both sides, right?
Yep.
So the business sides, they also need to understand that they need to understand the technical language as well. Otherwise, everything is based on technology. So what do you think about that?
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Okay.
I don't think it is their responsibility at all.
Okay.
I don't think we should put anything on them. Certainly, I mean, this is where I was talking about leaders that care about security, leaders that don't care about security.
Okay.
That is motivation. At the end of the day, the business is driven by what makes the business grow. And so we have to go there. They don't have to come to us.
Okay. So it depends on the type of business as well. A fintech is a technology-based business. So most probably the leaders will focus on technology. Andres, you had a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Bryson, for this presentation. And I have a question that is care about security, because you say leaders that care about security, but I say care about security or care about risks.
What was the last word? Care about what?
Risk.
Oh, risk.
Because I suppose that when you speak the language of the business, the language of the business is risks. For that reason, I say that I don't know if it's care about security, because security is a technical issue at the end, but risks is a business at the end. And what is most important for you? That was my question. When you was talking about that I say, okay, let me and I try to think is care about security or maybe care about risks.
Right. So security is the assurance that I can manage risk. That is my mitigating factor. So I use security to mitigate risk. So there is a correlation between the two. So security is the investment from the business based on how they understand risk. That was also why I recommended looking at business filings where the business actually lists out the risks to the business, because that is showing you what they think their priorities are. And computer risk is not typically the highest risk that they see. I'll give you an example. I mean, particularly with the issues that we've had over the pandemic in the last 2 years, supply chain is a risk. And it's not supply chain from a computer security perspective. It is supply chain from, can I even get the goods for my business to be able to operate? I mean, if I can't get supplies, none of this matters.
Yeah.
What am I mitigating? I'm mitigating nothing. I have nothing to mitigate, right? So that's just an example of where there's the hierarchy of risk, and then again, security is the mitigation against those risks.
Okay.
And Bryson, I'm assuming as a CISO in an organization, it's a balancing act, right? I mean, crap, we need to be focused on technology, and in this case, cybersecurity, because that's why we are the CISO. But we also need to learn and be focused on the business aspect. I mean, the question is, I mean, how do we balance that as CISOs? I mean, I know your presentation was about that, but exactly, what is your first step recommendation you make for CISOs to start getting that balance?
So that's where I recommend the Sunil Yu Cyber Defense Matrix. Chart your people, process, and technology, not just the technology. Your people are part of that too. Put that on that chart, and that shows you what you've already got. Right? Is it all perfectly configured? Is it where it's supposed to be? No, but at least you know what you have against that kind of coverage, and then you can start that. That's how you simplify your view of your side of things, and then you can start to look then at how do I tailor those again to the business context. So it starts with yourself, right? You got to know what you got. You got to know where you are, then understanding that, and then starting to bring the two together.
Okay. Metrics, that's a language that these elephants speak, right? Those because metrics are not specifically technical. So what type of metrics do you recommend?
Yeah, so I mean, the metrics I showed there were really around the internal improvement and understanding of the program, right? What can I see? What does it mean? And then my ability to reduce time across the phases of detect, recover, and respond. And so how that has value into the business side of it is what I'm using to, the signal I'm using to drive to measure those are business-based threats. So okay. That's how you're tying it together, because you can now tell the story over time of how the business is assured against the things that are happening. Something I didn't mention that if you're doing this correctly, that is interesting, and there are very few places, I mean, very, very, very few places that are doing this correctly. If you really get behaviorally focused in terms of that process, you are actually going to proactively stop things and catch things. You're going to minimize them. And how that works is when we look at the attack chains, the attack patterns of bad actors, there's a lot of similarity. They really only introduce a few novel twists on each one, and they reuse the same stuff because it keeps working. And so if you're behaviorally focused, you might not stop them on step one, because that's where they're going to introduce a novel component, but you're probably going to catch them on step 3, 4, or 5, where they start to reuse some things, and you now had, you've built this depth that is focused on those behaviors. You will catch things quicker in the future, unlike today where we keep getting surprised.
Well, bless you there.
Yeah, it's just the cold season coming in, so yeah. That's why
I thought it was because my cat just walked in that you're allergic to cats remotely. Okay, last question for you. Site, your platform, right, allows you, do you use it to combine with your metrics, or what's the best way to use the tool site as part of the conversation process here?
Sure. So the tool is the ability to immediately operationalize any threat at scale. That's what's unique. There are very limited professional tool sets for doing little things like this with highly trained red teamers. And then on the other side is more of a compliance-based, like breach and attack simulation space. And we're kind of a mix between the two. So you don't have to be very clever. If you are, it's a force multiplier to you being able to react quicker to the business with driving threat understanding. And on this side, you have the ability to automate it so that you can easily build off of where you are. So that's all it is just the ability to immediately recreate anything easily and share that and have it integrated for making it easier for the business to understand what's happening.
All right, and then the last question I like. So can you use, again, we started the conversation with what's going on in the industry right now with Log4j. Can you use Site right now to emulate Log4j and detect? Yeah.
Yep, we released that yesterday.
That's amazing. Really quick, so tell us about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, if you go to, so we created what we call the marketplace. It's probably not the best name, but the idea behind the marketplace is that no one company can keep up with all of this. We have a great team. We can't keep up with all of this either. And so what we want to do is make it easy for anybody to share this kind of tradecraft. So in this case, Log4j is essentially just an additional technique with a chain. And so that's where we shared it. So if you, I don't know, I think it's called marketplace.scythe.io, and you'll see our Log4j module there that works within the Scythe platform. And the advantage you get from that is not only are we looking at, you as a CISO can go, well, where do I stand with the Log4j stuff? And you can run what it is today. And then again, going back to where I was showing with the lolbas part, like start putting other variables around it, right? Well, yeah, this is what they did yesterday. But what if they decided to do this? Or what if this is what I'm concerned about with my business? And you could just make little tweaks, and it's very simple to do that. And now you're able to see, you know, this whole cone of probability off of what we learned yesterday, and you can automatically generate it to get ahead of them, because that's where they're going to go tomorrow.
Nice, very nice. So yeah, so go to Scythe and the site for Scythe, and yeah, start playing around with the platform. I know that Jorge was in the show. He was showing us the platform, and it was really, really amazing. So thank you, Bryson. Thank you so much for being with us and being the first speaker to kick this off. I see that we already have Wendy Nather here waiting on the, wow, look at her. So appreciate it, Bryson. Thank you so much for your time, buddy.
Awesome.
Yes, Bryson.
And now your conference gets better because Wendy is following me.
Oh, stop, Bryson.